Hello there, everyone. Being human is fucking hard. I'll just start the video that way. And no, I'm not going to apologize for my language. I mean, it's fucking hard. And we make videos, we make art, we work at jobs, we have families, we have hobbies and interests and joys, we learn language, we do all these wonderful things in life, but we still stop and ask ourselves, what the fuck is going on here? At least some of us do. I talk to folks who sometimes somebody will bring up something in a conversation and they'll say, well, you know, the people who never think about life or this or that, or the people who are asleep. And it always leads me back to thinking, is there really anyone out there who's actually asleep to the fact that they're born and they're going to die? Of course not. Humans are aware of that. unless you have some severe mental issues, you're well aware of the fact that you're born, that you live life like everyone else, and then you die. How each person deals with that, of course, is where the differences come in. A Christian may live their life only to serve the afterlife, which may or may not exist. But either way, they're living their life towards an end in an understanding that their time here is limited. An atheist, on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, they may have the same approach to life. They may want to do good things and, well, shouldn't get into the religious component of it, nor atheism, because it really doesn't define what I'm trying to say here. But that it doesn't matter which extreme end of the spectrum you're at, you share some certain values as humans that we all consider to be, well, values. A good character values. You know, these are things like trustworthiness, work ethic, you know. And to stop at work ethic, you know, there's been a huge, well, let's just say that over, you know, my life, I've spoken to a lot of people with a lot of different ideas about what work ethic is and what work really is. I've met people who will dismiss or insult anyone who works, let's say, a job where they're not doing actual physical labor. A person may say, well, I work really hard and I sweat all day, and you don't. So you don't deserve, or you haven't earned that money as a businessman or whatnot. And in a lot of situations, I can agree with that. In other words, if a person's selling real estate, and I'm not talking cheap real estate, I'm talking, you know, multi-million-dollar real estate. Yeah, they have to make a sale, but they might make, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars off of one sale. Some of them do really well, and some of them don't. You can't just say, well, just because you're making money off of, you know, off of other people's purchases, that you're not working. But let me get back to the point here, because I was a roofer when my first job. I was doing pizzas for a while, but then I went into roofing, and roofing was the damn hardest job. You know, doing 3-layer tear-offs in the rain or the sun, and slipping and falling and wearing corks, and then I went on to construction for, you know, a decade and a half. I did various things on and off. I was a carpenter. I built decks and houses and foundations and everything. And I've worked in a shitty warehouse where we processed nasty, destroyed foods. I've had some pretty shitty jobs, is my point. That where I'm at right now, let's say, with, like, I have my herb business now, it's still a pain in the ass. Everything you do, no matter what you do, if you want to do it right and you want to have something work, you got to play the game, you got to get into this system, you got to pay taxes. And we'll go through these little phases where you might think, well, I just want to withdraw from society and, let's say, just do my own thing, go out and go solo. And then you realize that there's nowhere to go, that no matter where you go, you still need resources, that we are kind of trapped. And this is what I mean about being human. Today, being human is completely different than it was even 100 years ago, or a couple hundred years ago, to where a person really could, let's say, pack up and just move into the woods and say, I'm just going to live here. And now all the land's taken here in the U.S., everything's claimed, you can still do it, you can still homestead in certain spots in some countries, and some places will still pay you to live there. But in the long run, we're all here, is kind of my point. We're all trapped in the same reality, and we all have slightly different views about what's important. But ultimately, once in a while, we all got to step back and just say, wait a minute, we really don't know shit. You know, we've spoken about language and how I've talked to people who say that language, I've talked to folks who say that language is horrible, that it's caused humans to lose the connection we once had. But I really don't believe that at all. I maybe once did. I would hear people say that, you know, at one time we just communicated through gestures or psychically or whatever it may be. But looking at history now and knowing what I can learn from history, I don't think that our grunts and gruns of ancient times would go over too well today. I don't think that we were ever connected on a level of psychic, New Age type spirituality where there was a great civilization here and that we somehow fell out of grace. All that just becomes fodder. It makes no sense, and it makes no headway. Okay, it makes sense perhaps that a culture lived here before us on Earth, but I think that people use that as, let me try to explain where I'm coming from here. People use this idea of Atlantis or whatever it may be, various ancient cultures, to kind of set a precedence for what we should be doing today. When people say, well, we've fallen out of our, you know, our natural graces, or, you know, I say, well, when were we ever really together? I mean, if mankind could abuse land and abuse his privileges long ago, he would have. As soon as we had metal and machinery and we were able to start digging, we did so. And just because of ancient, you know, our ancestors, just because they didn't, we think they didn't destroy the land, or that we're all of a sudden somehow evil in this society, I find that's complete nonsense. We know so much more now. In other words, we had to go through all this shit to find out what wasn't working. It's like until you've tried everything, you won't know what works and what doesn't work. Now we thought that materialism, you know, gain, money, would bring us happiness, and it never did. So now a lot of people are trying to move back to a simpler way of life. But that does not mean that you have to leave society completely, nor does it mean you have to give up all the wonderful things that we can use, stereos and houses and cars. In other words, it's never the possession of material goods that causes a person grief. It's attachment to material goods. And in this life, can you really blame people for becoming attached to things? I mean, really think about it for a minute. You know, it's easy to look at people and say, you know, they're materialist. I mean, I do it too. One of my friends posted something on Facebook earlier about with him and his daughter in Versace sunglasses, and he made sure to put the names and the brand names, and I just rolled my eyes and I was like, who gives a shit? But I also realized that to him that might be important. It's not just the sunglasses. It's not just the money he spent. It's trying to fit in and show others that that I'm doing well, or I'm doing okay, or that I can afford this or do this. And I guess what I'm saying is to really break it down to the reasons why we do things. And it makes people appear much less threatening. And it makes the world appear much less scary. You can easily look at a person and find one bad thing they've done and dwell on that. And we do that regularly. We see a couple corrupt politicians, and so we say all politicians are corrupt. There's a few businesses that are causing problems, and all businesses are corrupt. I mean, I've been the same way. I've always been very opposed to, corporate interests and how they drive the people out. This is happening right here where I live, and it's been going on for a few years now. About a year ago on YouTube here, I posted a video about the Nestle. Nestle's trying to buy they're trying to buy land here in the gorge up the way from my house, right up in the Columbia Gorge, and they want to bottle water from our water sources. And these guys have been doing this all over the place. In California, they ended up, taking all the water out of this northern California area. They were taking all this water out of a spring. They didn't even pay the land use taxes for their trucks. I think they're like 25, 30 years in debt of paying their fair share of the road tax and all these simple things. And now they want to build a water plant here in the gorge, and I thought that they were done because they went above the people's heads. I thought that it was screwed, but the people retaliated and they stood up. And we're going to kick Nestle's ass out of here, and they'll just move on to somewhere else. But my point in bringing this up is that this is what this is the benefit of the modern world, of the internet, of what we've been able to do with it. how it's allowed big business to flow faster, but it's also let people catch on to what's going on a lot faster. And the average person is going to gain more and more, let's just say they're going to gain more and more authority over what goes on as people can band together quickly and get their points out quickly. And what I see is civilization, as we start to figure out what we really want in life as individuals, we're going to come together in these little groups, and we're going to, as a whole, show the world what matters to us. And maybe in vain, but in many regards, it's been working. Many businesses have been stopped from, doing various, whatever they do, whether it's digging up land or, building on a swamp or something, people can become more aware of this and get more involved. But really, what does that say? It gives us something it shows me that humans want to see great things in their world, even if they know that they may not ever get to experience it. Sometimes we have to give up a little bit of our own comfort and fight for what's right, even if we might not see the results. And seeing that people do that, it gives me a lot of hope for, humanity in general, but ultimately we have to step back again look at the big picture. What does my fucking hope in humanity mean at all? Nothing. And neither does yours. It's like, whatever we hope for humanity, or whatever utopian dream we have, or a delusion about the future, it's going to be nothing like we think. We cannot picture, when I was growing up, let's say in the 80s, and I remember, talking with friends and whatnot about what the future would be like, and we'd watch movies like Blade Runner and, whatever futuristic movies were out, and sometimes they'd hit the mark, but most of the time they'd fall short. The technology was never even quite as good as it actually is today. However, the things that they show humans doing in the future, such as, let's say, pre-crime, the Minority Report, that kind of stuff is probably going to start happening to one extent or another, but I think our human side is much too strong for us ever to become a rigid, non-emotional, society, what I call a homogenized society. And and I feel like there's so many people fighting for that. And this brings us down to equal rights and equality and feminism and masculinity, and everybody wants to be recognized for what they have. It's like, hey, look, I have these coins. Oh, I have these coins. It's like everybody has their baseball cards and they're going around showing each other, and maybe they can trade. That's how it's kind of like that with our values. Like, if you have something to hold on to that you like, for some people it's, they say they're Scottish. Like, for example, my grandfather was Scottish. My grandparents, I think it was my great-grandparents, moved over here from Scotland. And on the other side, they moved over here from Germany. Now, I think Scotland's pretty cool. So I could easily start wearing the crest for my family name and get all into that, but I'm not associated with that. I don't care. I've never been to Scotland. It doesn't matter where my ancestors were from. But to some people, that's very important to them. This is their ancestry. This is their heritage. And we have to ask ourselves why. And that's because people want to feel like they're part of something. And everybody wants to be part of some kind of a group or something, even if they don't. I've spoken with a lot of folks who say that, groups are bad and that you should never join a big group, and they're always, and I totally agree with that they do become corrupt. Like I was saying the other day, it's like mitosis. When a cell gets too big, it's better to split than to try to keep growing. And this is exactly how it goes with any, whether it be a business, corporation, idea, entity, or, anything. But it's because people can be infiltrated. Groups can be infiltrated. So what we formed is all these little groups to try to show each other which baseball cards we have, to say, well, how well does this really work in society? Can we really apply these values? And then you step back from it, and there's people like, you get into it, you get into what you're talking about, somebody else gets into what they're talking about, and then pretty soon there's a group that's protesting something, and then another group that's retaliating against that, and then you have thousands of people fighting about something that may be completely irrelevant. But this, I'm glad I said the irrelevant, because it brought me to, it reminded me of something I thought of earlier I wanted to mention. Trivial things, or trivialities, that there is nothing trivial in this life. Because I've always been very, very annoyed with small talk. I don't like talking about the weather or sports or anything that has to do with anything that's basically a daily occurrence or something. Hey, it's rainy today. Yep. But I find myself doing it. Oh, it's going to be a beautiful day today. You know, that kind of stuff. If you're just passing by somebody, you can't just jump up, walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm Josh. Yeah, what's your philosophy on the, existence of the universe? I mean, it doesn't work that way. Small talk is important, but the trivialities and the things that I once found trivial, and still do, and not just in conversation, but in just daily life, it just was an epiphany to me today. And I was driving somewhere and I realized there are no trivialities. If it's important to you, then it's important to everyone. In other words, tell me something that's not trivial, okay? And a person may say, well, let's say, okay, let's just take global warming, for example. A person would say, that's not trivial because that's a huge, huge burden. It could kill off the plants, the animals, the people. And I say, look ahead 1 billion years into the future. Is it trivial then? Or look back 14 billion years. Is it trivial then? And when you really compare anything that we think is important to the big picture, you realize that ultimately the Earth's going to burn up, the sun's going to burn out, everything's going to disappear. It doesn't really matter. But everything matters. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's since the trivial things matter, but since nothing really matters in the long run, all that matters is that your individual life is fulfilled with as many fun things that you can do and as many experiences. Life is not activities or just gain. It's experiences. And those experiences don't have to be good ones. It doesn't mean that we have to have all these great, and I want to go climb this mountain and go here. You can live a very modest, mild life and enjoy it. But here I am at 40 years old. All I know is through my eyes of a 40-year-old that's lived my life. I don't know what other 40-year-olds think. I remember what it was like to be 20 as myself, but I don't know what it's like to be another 20-year-old, especially in today's world. I mean, I can't even imagine if I had the internet when I was young, how much more shit that I would have filled my head with, but I had my share of books. And, and I also don't know what it's like to be 60, and I won't until I'm 60. And so I guess what I'm saying here is that we go through many phases, and like there was an old timer on the discussion yesterday on Sunday. It was the Logic Church, and I don't remember the guy's name. It was an older guy, and he says he goes through phases, and it was just kind of a passing thing in the discussion. Nobody mentioned anything, but instantly I knew where he was coming from in regards to you'll change your mind eventually. And people say, oh, never, I'll always be this way. Like, for example, when I was in my 20s, I said, oh, I'll always smoke pot. I'll never stop smoking because I love it. But that's stupid. Why would I ever say that? Of course I'll want to eventually quit smoking pot. Maybe not, but you can't determine that at 20. I always said I'll never be an alcoholic and I won't drink. And I don't, but I can't say that I won't later in life, or that I might not have some major life crisis that causes me to become an addict to whatever it may be. The point is that you can't determine what's going to happen. You can't say that I'm going to be this way forever because people are changing. So if you're my age or older, you know what I'm talking about. If you're younger, hopefully you realize this so you can move forward and not try to attach to who you used to be. Because ultimately we ask ourselves, who are we? And it comes down to that conversation of, you are your value system. You are your character. You're not your memories, because if you forget some of your past, you're still you. You're not your body, because you could still be just a brain and you'd be you. But you're not your brain, because nobody cares about a lump of meat in your head either. You are your character. The only way that you can become something else or lose who you are is through some of the worst things like Alzheimer's, where but even that, still the person might remember certain components. But basically, my point here is that none of our physical existence is us. That only our ideas matter, only our values matter. And that if your values are out of whack, out of line with society's, then it doesn't matter how hard you work physically, it doesn't matter how many accomplishments you make. If the values behind it aren't proper, then it makes it difficult to, well, I guess I can't really speak for everyone. Maybe there are people out there with bad values who make great contributions. I don't know. But I guess I would just like to say that people are people. And this is a really confusing life. That's a stupid thing to say. How do I word it? I say, oh, this is a crazy world, and people say that. It's like, well, compared to what, you know? On the Logic Church yesterday, I jumped in when they were talking about UtOpIa, and I kind of missed the discussion, but UtOpIa to me is just, it's a pipe dream. It doesn't exist. But it doesn't exist not because we're not willing as humans to make a utopia. In other words, if all the humans said, we want to create a utopian world, and we all agreed on what that world was like, it would still not be a utopia. Because by contrast, eventually, some of the simpler things like stubbing your toe may become a complete nuisance and ruin your whole day. As opposed to the more adversity that you deal with in your life. The stronger of a person you become, the stronger your character. We all see people who have, come and spoken out after they were abused or beaten down or whatnot because of their sex, their religion, politics, whatnot. And they're very strong people, and nothing scares them. They don't give a shit because they've already been exposed. They've already been beaten. And they're like, what else can you do to me? And the folks who withdraw and hold themselves back, who never want to make waves, who never want to step up and say anything to cause any type of, controversy, even when they know it's right, while you think that you may be avoiding, controversy, in fact, you're adding to it. I guess a simpler way to put it would be to say that inaction is just as bad as bad action, or however the term goes, that, that if you're not taking action on something you see that's wrong, then you're part of the problem. And so I think the problem, the difficult part is for people to agree on what is wrong. And people can't. The Christians think the Muslims are wrong. The Muslims think the Christians are the problem. This is why the utopia will never work. If we really want to talk about making life livable, it's got to come from within. When I made that discovery, it's changed my life. It's something that I always knew, but I had to tell myself and convince myself that it was true through practice. Just like when you're young, my son, I'm teaching him how to tie his shoe, He's frustrated with it. When he finally gets it, he'll be all over it, and it'll just be a normal thing, second nature. He won't even remember how he did it. It just happens. And I feel that seeing the world as a phenomenal place is the exact same thing. It's training your brain over a period of time, and that's, it just takes a lot of work. So if you think this is a crazy fucking world, you're not alone. We all do. And even the people who tend to hide themselves away, truly deep down inside, they all feel it. Everyone feels it. So with that, I bid you adieu, and good luck, everybody. I hope you're having a phenomenal